Back in college, I invited my friends Ryan and Cooper over to my dorm room for a night of board games. After a few rounds, we decided to spice things up by playing with a Ouija board. It was around 2 o'clock a.m., and we were in my room upstairs. For some reason, our college had multiple basements. However, we thought nothing of it as we set the scene with the lights on. We began by asking, "Are there any spirits in this room?" To our surprise, the planchette moved to yes, twice, as if it was emphatically confirming its presence. At first, we shrugged it off, treating it like a silly game. We asked the spirit his name, and it spelled out Susie. We chuckled, thinking it was a pretty mundane name for a ghost. Curiosity got the better of us, so we asked, "How did you die?" The planchette moved slowly, spelling out, "In the basement." Confused, Cooper asked, "Which basement?" since our school had several. The board responded with, "Number 3. We realized we were in basement number 2, and a chill ran down our spines. We started to feel uneasy, but pressed on. "How did you die?" we asked again. The planchette spelled out, "From a sword." This puzzled us even more. The school was built in 1945, the same year World War II ended. Why would there be a sword involved? Despite our growing fear, we decided to check out basement number 3. As we cautiously entered, our flashlights flickered over something metallic. There, against the wall, was a sword. But it wasn't just lying there. It was hovering, as if pinning an invisible figure against the wall. The air around it felt heavy and charged. Suddenly, it hit us. Susie was still there, her spirit trapped. Panic set in, and we bolted back to our room, our hearts pounding. Once we were safely inside, I blurted out, "Can we end this game?" The planchette moved to yes. We never touched the Ouija board again. The memory of that night lingered, a chilling reminder of the unseen and unknown. This happened many years ago when I was about 12 years old. I grew up in a nice neighborhood in an old 2-story Victorian house. We lived in the foothills of the Santa Cruz Mountains, on a quiet street corner. It was a great area to grow up in, with lots of nature to explore and few fences to stop kids and their dogs from roaming. I'm the oldest of 4, but at that time, my parents didn't think I was old enough to babysit my siblings alone for a night. So they hired a babysitter to watch us. I had a huge crush on her. She was 17 and gorgeous, so I was okay with the arrangement. It was just a normal summer night, warm and with a bright moon. It was late, probably around 11 p.m. My brother and sisters had gone to bed. I was up reading, and the babysitters were watching TV downstairs. My little brother and I shared a big room on the 2nd floor that looked over the front yard. I was reading in my bed when suddenly my brother, in a frightened voice, called my name. I thought he was dreaming, but then he sat bolt upright in bed and stared out the window. This freaked me out, so I ran over to him. My brother pointed outside and asked, "Who is that man?" Down in the front yard, about 20 yards away, was a lanky, long-haired man looking up into the sky. His arms were outstretched, and he was slowly spinning. Then he started moaning. I immediately panicked. This was how some horror movies start. I jumped up and ran into the hallway, glad that my parents hadn't put me in charge. Waiting for me were my sisters, who had been woken up by the noise outside, and the babysitter, who came tearing up the stairs wide-eyed. Now I was really scared. Nobody knew what to do, and the sitter wasn't offering any ideas. For some reason, I decided to call our neighbor across the street. He was a true curmudgeon, but he knew us. I figured he wouldn't be scared. I grabbed the phone, no cell phones or even cordless ones back then. He answered after a few rings, and I asked him if he could see anyone out front. We saw him on the front lawn, which he had a clear view of from his house. He was obviously annoyed, but he did go look. A couple of minutes later, he returned to the phone and told me there was nothing and that I needed to go back to bed. However, we were in no state to sleep. I quickly returned to my brother's window and looked again. The big moon was flooding the lawn with light, but there was no man. We tried to listen for the moaning, but heard nothing except a symphony of crickets. The sitter was not going back downstairs alone, and nobody else was going to sleep anytime soon. We all agreed to go down together and make sure all the doors and windows were locked. We crept downstairs and quickly broke into two groups to check all the doors. I was with the sitter to check the front, and my siblings checked the back of the house. All went well, locks were secured, and no weirdos barged into the house. But the sitter wanted me to look outside one more time. I was still scared, conjuring up way too many Friday the 13th and Halloween scenes that my friends and I had covertly watched on cable during sleepovers. But I didn't want to show it in front of the woman of my dreams. Just one more look, and maybe, just maybe, I'd get to be like the hero in one of those movies I wasn't supposed to watch. So I quietly moved to the front window that faced the front steps to our door. I craned my neck to look out towards the driveway and back towards the lawn where we had seen him before. Nothing. And then, suddenly, he was there, running full speed at the window. Half his face was gone, a mess of blood and torn flesh. He had blood all down his shirt and on his shorts. The sitter screamed, and I dropped to the floor in the most unmanly way possible. My siblings were crying in the hallway. He started pounding on the front door and yelling incoherently. I remember him saying at some point, "Let me in, please." Even though that seemed extremely polite for a mass murderer, there was no way I was going to let him in. Besides, I was frozen in fear on the floor. The most I could muster in a squeaky little boy voice was, Sir, we can't help you. Please go away." At least I did something. Our protector, the sitter, was long gone. He pounded on the door some more, gave a disappointed and helpless final yelp, and staggered off into the night. I just lay there for a while. After that, my siblings ran upstairs and huddled together. Soon after, about 20 minutes later, we saw lights and heard sirens. The sitter had done the same thing in her flight into the bowels of our home and called 911. They found the bloody man wandering down the street, and our nightmare was over. It turned out that he was a cyclist who went out for a full moon ride on a beautiful summer night. But he didn't see the storm ditch on our corner when he took a tight turn at high speed. He slid on his face for at least 20 feet. He eventually came to, but he was so delirious from his injuries and the shock that he was off his rocker. He had been wandering around for a while before any of us knew he was there. We found blood trails crisscrossing the front of the property the next morning. I still feel bad I didn't help him, but I was just a scared kid. My parents didn't go out without us for a while after that. For years, I was traumatized coming home at night, and nothing ever came of my infatuation. I don't think I ever saw her again. When I was 14, I lived with my parents and my 10-year-old sister in a typical suburban house in Connecticut. I had always believed in ghosts, but never had any personal experiences and didn't want to. My mom, on the other hand, was fascinated by the paranormal, loved watching ghost shows, and was always open to the idea of supernatural occurrences. About 6 months before the event, my aunt, my mom's sister, was diagnosed with terminal melanoma. The treatment did almost nothing to slow the disease's progression, and it was just a matter of time before it stopped working altogether. Towards the end of her treatment, our house felt heavy and dark. Whether it was my mom's sadness or something else, the atmosphere at home just felt dark. For context, the layout of our upstairs is important. We lived in a standard 2-story, 4-bedroom home. My room was directly next to the staircase, while my parents' and sister's rooms were at the other end of the hall, right next to each other. The house was relatively old, around 30 to 35 years, and the floors upstairs would creak loudly when I walked on, a sound my sister and I knew all too well when sneaking around for snacks at night, only to be caught by her father. One night, just before my aunt passed away, I was lying in bed with my doors open. The hall nightlight dimly lit the area, just enough to keep it from being pitch black. As I lay there, I felt a gut-wrenching sense of heavy energy and uneasiness in the house. Despite hating having my door open, my parents insisted it be kept that way for safety. Suddenly, I heard horrific, heavy footsteps running from my parents' room, down the hallway, and then down the stairs. The speed and weight of the footsteps were terrifying, like a big man in work boots running for his life. I sat up immediately and listened intently. The footsteps continued down the stairs fast and heavy. The next thing I knew, the light turned on, and my father was hauling down the stairs. I could hear him searching the house, while my mom stood at the top of the stairs, looking down. I asked, "What's going on?" She asked me, "Were you out of bed?" To which I said no. My dad came back up and asked me the same question, then checked on my sister, who was sound asleep. He double-checked that nobody was in the house. My mom ended the situation with, "Just stay in bed for the night," and that was it. Nothing more was said. I remember being more scared than I'd ever been before. It was my first unexplained encounter. My mom later told me it might have been someone coming to visit or taking your aunt home. I didn't know how to feel about that, but those footsteps remain etched in my memory forever.